What if I told you that a marine biologist spent 30 years searching for mermaids, and what he found in the depths of the Pacific Ocean will blow your mind? What if I told you that Dr. James Hartwell discovered not just mermaids, but an entire underwater civilization that's been watching humanity for thousands of years? This is the incredible story of a man who risked everything to prove that legends are real, and ended up discovering a truth about himself that changed the fate of two worlds forever. Drop a comment and tell us what country you're watching from. And if you want to discover what's really hidden in the deepest parts of our oceans, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about life on Earth. What Dr. Hartwell found at the bottom of the sea will shock you to your core. Dr. James Hartwell had spent 30 years of his life chasing what others called myths. At 52, he was a marine biologist who had devoted his entire career to one impossible quest: finding proof that mermaids existed. His colleagues at the University of California had long ago stopped taking him seriously, his research grants had dried up, and his wife had left him 5 years earlier, claiming she couldn't compete with his fish fantasies. But James couldn't let go. Not after what he'd seen during a deep-sea diving expedition 20 years ago, off the coast of the Mariana Trench. Professor Hartwell, his graduate assistant Sarah Chen, said that Tuesday morning, the university board wants to see you again. They're talking about reassignment. James looked up from his sonar equipment, which he'd been studying obsessively for weeks. Reassignment to what? Teaching freshman biology. Actually, they mentioned early retirement. James felt his stomach drop. Early retirement meant the end of his research, the end of his life's work. He was so close. He could feel it. The sonar readings from the past month had shown consistent patterns of large, intelligent movement in the depths of Monterey Bay. Movement that followed no known marine animal behavior. "Sarah, look at these readings," he said, spreading the charts across his cluttered desk. "These aren't whales, they're not schools of fish, they're not any known sea creature." Sarah studied the data reluctantly. She was a bright student who had been assigned to work with James as part of her marine biology program, but she clearly considered it academic exile. "Professor, these could be equipment malfunctions, or underwater currents, or they could be exactly what I've been looking for my entire career." That evening, James made a decision that would change his life forever. He loaded his personal research boat, the Poseidon's Dream, with enough supplies for a week-long expedition. If the university wanted to force him into retirement, he would give them one final reason to either validate his work or dismiss him completely. The Poseidon's Dream was a 30-foot research vessel equipped with advanced sonar, underwater cameras, diving equipment, and a small submersible that James had purchased with his own savings. His neighbors in the marina thought he was crazy, but James had learned to ignore the opinions of others long ago. As he set sail into the Pacific at dawn, James thought about the moment that had started his obsession. 20 years ago, during a routine deep-sea research dive, he had seen something impossible. A figure moving through the water with impossible grace, too far away to be certain, but unmistakably humanoid. His diving partner had seen nothing, the cameras had captured only shadows, but James knew what he had witnessed. The sonar readings had been leading him to the same area consistently. A deep underwater canyon about 30 miles off the California coast, in waters so deep that sunlight never reached the bottom. According to his calculations, if there was an undiscovered species living in those depths, they would have evolved in complete isolation for millions of years. "If I'm wrong," James said to himself as he navigated toward the coordinates, "then I'm a delusional old man who wasted his life chasing fantasies. But if I'm right..." The first day of the expedition yielded nothing unusual. James deployed his underwater cameras and sonar equipment, but the readings showed only the normal marine life of the deep Pacific. He spent the night anchored over the canyon, listening to the sounds of the ocean and wondering if he was finally losing his sanity. On the second day, everything changed. James was reviewing footage from his underwater cameras when he saw something that made his heart stop. At first, it looked like a shadow moving past the camera lens. But when he slowed the footage and enhanced the image, he could clearly see a long, powerful tail and what appeared to be a human torso. "My God," he whispered, replaying the footage over and over. "My God, there you are." Energized by this discovery, James immediately deployed his submersible, a small one-person craft that could descend to depths of 1,000 feet. As he descended into the darkness of the canyon, his sonar began picking up multiple large signatures moving in coordinated patterns below him. At 800 feet, James turned on his external lights and nearly crashed the submersible in shock. They were everywhere. Dozens of them, moving through the water with impossible grace and intelligence. They had the upper bodies of humans, muscular, athletic, beautiful, but from the waist down, they possessed powerful fish-like tails that propelled them through the water faster than any human could swim. But it was their faces that truly stunned James. These weren't the romanticized mermaids of fairy tales. They were clearly intelligent beings, with complex facial expressions, sophisticated communication patterns, and technology that James couldn't begin to understand. As James watched in amazement, one of the creatures noticed his submersible. Instead of fleeing, it approached with obvious curiosity. Through the porthole, James found himself face to face with a being that challenged everything he thought he knew about evolution and life on Earth. The creature, James couldn't think of it as anything other than a mermaid, despite how inadequate the term seemed, had long, flowing hair that moved like seaweed in the current, large intelligent eyes that seemed to study him with as much fascination as he was studying her, and skin that appeared to be covered in subtle scales that shimmered in his lights. But most shocking of all, the creature began to communicate. It wasn't spoken language, but rather a complex series of gestures and what appeared to be bioluminescent patterns on its skin. James realized he was witnessing not just an unknown species, but an intelligent civilization that had developed completely separately from human society. More mermaids approached the submersible, and James could see that they were talking among themselves, pointing at his craft, clearly debating what to do about this strange visitor from the surface world. Then one of them did something that changed everything. It spoke. Not in the water, which should have been impossible, but directly into James's mind. The voice was feminine, melodic, and carried with it emotions and concepts that human language couldn't adequately express. "Surface dweller," the voice said, "why have you come to our domain?" James nearly fainted from shock. Not only were mermaids real, but they were telepathic. I'm a scientist," he managed to think back, hoping they could hear him. "I've spent my whole life looking for proof that you exist. And now that you have found us, what will you do with this knowledge?" The question hung in James's mind like a challenge. He realized that this moment would define not just his own future, but potentially the future of two entire species. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I never thought this far ahead." The mermaid who had been speaking to him turned to the others, and James could see them engaged in rapid communication. Their bioluminescent patterns flashed in complex sequences, and their hand gestures became more animated. Finally, the spokesman turned back to James. "You will come with us," she said. "There are things you must see before you decide what to do with your discovery." "Come with you. But I can't breathe underwater." "We have ways. But you must trust us." James looked around at the dozens of mermaids surrounding his submersible, realized that he was completely at their mercy anyway, and made the decision that would change his life forever. "I trust you." What happened next defied every law of physics and biology that James thought he understood. The mermaids began to sing, not with voices, but with vibrations that seemed to come from their entire bodies. The water around the submersible began to glow, and James felt his craft being gently guided deeper into the canyon. As they descended, James saw lights in the distance that couldn't possibly exist at this depth. The lights grew brighter and more numerous, until finally James realized he was looking at something that should have been impossible: an underwater city. The city stretched across the floor of the canyon, with buildings that seemed to be grown rather than built, lit by some form of bioluminescence that turned the ocean floor into a fairyland of soft, shifting colors. There were gardens of sea plants arranged in geometric patterns, structures that looked like amphitheaters where hundreds of mermaids gathered, and what appeared to be technology that James couldn't begin to understand. "Welcome," the mermaids said as they approached the city, "to Aquatilia, the civilization your kind has spent centuries dismissing as myth." James stared in wonder at the impossible sight before him, realizing that his life's work had led him to a discovery that would change not just marine biology, but humanity's understanding of life on Earth itself. But as they descended toward the city, James began to understand that this discovery would come with responsibilities and consequences that he had never imagined. As James's submersible was guided into the mermaid city of Aquatilia, he struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. The city was vast, stretching across the ocean floor for miles in every direction. The architecture was unlike anything in human civilization, buildings that curved and flowed like living coral, connected by tubes that allowed the mermaids to swim rapidly from one area to another. How is this possible? James thought to his telepathic guide, whose name, he learned, was Nerida. Your kind believes that intelligence can only exist as you have experienced it, Nerida replied. But life finds many paths to consciousness. The submersible was guided to what appeared to be a docking area, where James saw technology that challenged everything he understood about underwater engineering. The structures seemed to be living organisms that had been shaped and trained to serve specific purposes. What he had initially thought were buildings were actually enormous sea creatures that had been domesticated and modified to serve as homes and workplaces. How long has this city existed? James asked. By your measurements of time, approximately 12,000 years. But our civilization is much older. We have built cities in every ocean of your world. James felt his worldview crumbling and rebuilding itself with every revelation. Every ocean. How many of you are there? More than there are humans on your surface world. We are the older species, Dr. Hartwell. We were building civilizations when your ancestors were still learning to make fire. The submersible came to rest in what appeared to be an airlock chamber, though James couldn't understand how it could function underwater. Suddenly, the water around his craft began to drain away, leaving him in a breathable atmosphere that somehow existed at the bottom of the ocean. How is this possible? He gasped as Nerida approached his craft, now able to speak aloud. We have mastered what you call aquatic engineering, she explained. We can create pockets of atmosphere wherever we need them. Your lungs were designed for air, not water, so we accommodate your limitations. James opened the submersible's hatch and stepped out onto a platform that felt solid beneath his feet, despite being surrounded by water on all sides. Nerida stood before him, and he could now see her clearly without the distortion of water and glass. She was even more beautiful than he had imagined, tall and graceful, with skin that had a subtle pearl-like luminescence and long hair that seemed to move independently of any current. But it was her eyes that captured his attention, ancient, intelligent, and filled with a wisdom that spoke of millennia of accumulated knowledge. Come, she said, gesturing toward an opening in what James now realized was a living building. The council wishes to meet you. As they walked, or rather, as Nerida glided and James stumbled to keep up, through the corridors of the city, James saw wonders that would have been beyond human imagination. Gardens of sea plants that were clearly cultivated with scientific precision, libraries where knowledge was stored not in books but in complex arrangements of bioluminescent organisms, and workshops where mermaids crafted tools and art from materials James couldn't identify. Your species appears to have developed along completely different evolutionary lines, James observed. How did you achieve technology without metallurgy or fire? We learned to work with life instead of against it, Nerida explained. What you call technology, we consider cooperation with other species. These buildings are our partners, not our possessions. They grow and adapt to our needs in exchange for care and protection. They entered a vast chamber that James immediately recognized as some kind of council hall. Hundreds of mermaids were arranged in concentric circles around a central platform, and James could feel the weight of their attention as Nerida led him to the center. An elderly mermaid with silver-white hair and scales that seemed to shimmer with their own light approached them. James could sense immediately that this was a figure of enormous authority and respect. Dr. James Hartwell, the elderly mermaid said, her telepathic voice carrying with it centuries of wisdom. I am Oceana, first speaker of the Deep Council. We have been watching your species for millennia, and we have been watching you specifically for 20 years. Watching me? James said, startled. Since the day you first glimpsed one of our people during your deep-sea expedition. We have been monitoring your research, your dedication to finding us. You are not the first surface dweller to discover our existence, but you may be the most persistent. What happened to the others who found you? Oceana's expression grew sad. Some we allowed to return to the surface with their memories altered. Others chose to remain with us. A few. She paused. A few were deemed too dangerous to either our people or their own, and had to be dealt with accordingly. James felt a chill run down his spine. Dealt with how? Dr. Hartwell, you have stumbled upon the greatest secret in your world's history. A secret that, if revealed improperly, could lead to the destruction of both our civilizations. What do you mean? Another council member, a powerful-looking male mermaid with intricate tattoos covering his arms and chest, swam forward. Your kind has a history of destroying what they do not understand. When humans discover a new land, they conquer it. When they find new resources, they exploit them. When they encounter different peoples, they subjugate or eliminate them. But we're not all like that, James protested. There are humans who respect other cultures, who want to learn and cooperate. Yes, Oceana agreed. We know this. It is why you are here, alive and unharmed, having this conversation. But the question remains, what will you do with the knowledge you have gained? James looked around at the hundreds of mermaids watching him, each one representing a life and a civilization that had existed in secret for thousands of years. The weight of responsibility was crushing. I devoted my life to proving you existed. Now that I have, I'm not sure what comes next. That is honest, at least, Oceana said. Come. There is more you must see before any decisions are made. Over the next several hours, Oceana and Nerita gave James a tour of Aquatilia that revealed the true scope of mermaid civilization. He saw universities where young mermaids learned to communicate with dolphins and whales, laboratories where they developed new forms of biotechnology, and temples where they practiced spiritual traditions that predated any human religion. We are the guardians of the ocean, Oceana explained as they visited a facility where mermaids were carefully tending to coral reefs that had been damaged by human pollution. We have spent millennia maintaining the balance of sea life, cleaning the waters, protecting endangered species. The whales sing to us, another mermaid added. The dolphins bring us news. The great sea turtles carry our messages across the oceans. We are connected to every living thing in the sea. James watched in amazement as mermaids used their abilities to heal sick sea creatures, guide lost marine animals back to their proper territories, and maintain ecosystems with a sophistication that human marine biology was only beginning to understand. Your species has done considerable damage to our world in recent centuries, Oceana said sadly. Pollution, overfishing, climate change, these things affect us directly. Many of our cities have had to relocate as the ocean chemistry changes. But why haven't you made contact before now? Why remain hidden? We tried, long ago, Oceana replied. There are legends in your surface cultures about mermaids, sirens, sea gods. These are not myths, they are memories of our attempts at contact. But your ancestors feared us, worshipped us, tried to capture us. We learned that it was safer to remain hidden. As the tour continued, James began to understand that he had discovered not just a new species, but a civilization that was in many ways more advanced than human society. They had achieved sustainable technology, eliminated war and poverty within their own communities, and maintained a harmonious relationship with their environment for thousands of years. Dr. Hartwell, Nerita said as they swam through a district filled with art and music, we need to ask you something important. What? Are you willing to consider that your species might have something to learn from ours? The question struck James with unexpected force. He had spent 30 years trying to prove that mermaids existed, but he had never considered what it might mean if they had developed a superior form of civilization. You're more advanced than we are, aren't you? He said quietly. Advanced is not the right word, Oceana replied. We have chosen different priorities. Your species values individual achievement, competition, domination over nature. We value cooperation, harmony, sustainability. Neither approach is inherently superior, but perhaps complementary. What are you suggesting? We are suggesting, Dr. James Hartwell, that it may be time for our species to work together. The ocean is dying from human neglect. Climate change threatens both our civilizations. Perhaps it is time for the surface world to learn that they are not alone on this planet. James stared at the first speaker, beginning to understand the true magnitude of what was being offered to him. You want me to be, what? An ambassador. We want you to help us determine if humanity is ready for the truth. And if they are, to help us figure out how to reveal ourselves without causing panic, war, or mutual destruction. As James contemplated this enormous responsibility, he realized that his life's obsession had led him to something far greater than scientific discovery. He had stumbled upon the possibility of changing the course of human history itself. But first, there was one more revelation waiting for him that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his own identity and purpose. On his third day in Aquitilia, James was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had discovered. The mermaid civilization was so advanced, so perfectly adapted to their environment, that he felt like a primitive visitor from a barbaric world above. "Nerida," he said as they sat in what appeared to be a garden of sea anemones that glowed with soft bioluminescence, "how can my species possibly be worthy of contact with yours? We're destroying the planet, we wage constant wars, we can't even take care of our own people." "James," Nerida said gently, "there is something about yourself that you need to understand. Something that explains why you have been so obsessed with finding us, why you were able to see us when others could not, why you feel so at home here despite being so far from your natural element." "What do you mean?" Nerida exchanged a meaningful look with Oceana, who had been listening nearby. The first speaker approached them with an expression that James couldn't quite read. "Dr. Hartwell," Oceana said, "tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your earliest memories of the ocean." James frowned, wondering where this was leading. I've always loved the water. Even as a child, I was drawn to it in ways my parents couldn't understand. I could hold my breath underwater for impossible amounts of time. I could see clearly in murky water when other children couldn't. I always felt like the ocean was calling to me. "And your parents? Tell me about your family history." "My parents found me," James said slowly. "I was adopted. They found me as an infant, washed up on a beach in Northern California. No one ever figured out where I came from." Oceana and Nerida exchanged another look, and James felt a strange tingling in the back of his mind. "James," Nerida said gently, "do you remember what you thought when you first saw me clearly?" I thought you were beautiful. I thought you looked familiar, somehow. Like I had seen you before, or someone like you." "Look at your hands, James." James looked down at his hands and for the first time noticed something he had somehow overlooked his entire life. Between his fingers were very faint webs of skin, so subtle that they were almost invisible unless you knew to look for them. "Look at your eyes," Oceana said, producing what appeared to be a mirror made from polished shell. James stared at his reflection and gasped. His eyes, which he had always thought were simply an unusual shade of blue-green, were clearly similar to the eyes of the mermaids around him, and now that he was looking carefully, he could see that his skin had a very subtle luminescent quality that he had never noticed before. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." "James," Nerida said softly, "you are what we call a landwalker. You are half mermaid, half human. Your mother was one of us." The world seemed to spin around James as this revelation sank in. That's impossible. Humans and mermaids can't." "Can't what?" "Interbreed." Oceana smiled sadly. "James, why do you think we look so similar to humans? We are not as different as you believe. Our species diverged long ago, but we share common ancestors. Under certain circumstances, our kinds can indeed produce offspring." But I can't breathe underwater. I don't have a tail. The hybrid offspring of our species are born with the ability to survive in either environment, Narita explained. You can hold your breath underwater for extraordinary amounts of time because your lungs are more efficient than normal humans. You can see clearly in murky water because your eyes are adapted for underwater vision. You've always felt called to the ocean because part of you belongs here. James felt like his entire identity was crumbling and reforming. If this is true, then why don't I have a tail? Why can't I breathe underwater? Because you were raised on land, Oceana explained. Our young undergo a transformation during adolescence, but only if they are in the proper environment. Raised in air, you remained in your land-adapted form. But the potential for transformation still exists within you. Transformation? What do you mean? We mean, James, that if you choose to stay with us, if you truly want to become part of our world, the change is still possible. It would be painful, it would be permanent, and it would mean leaving your surface life forever. But it can be done. James stared at them in shock. You're offering to turn me into a mermaid? We're offering to help you become what you were always meant to be, Narita said. The choice is entirely yours. And if I choose to remain human? Then you return to the surface with a decision to make about what you've learned here. But you would return knowing who you truly are. James spent the next several hours in solitary contemplation, swimming through the city with an escort of young mermaids who seemed fascinated by this strange hybrid creature who walked on land but belonged to the sea. As he explored, James began to understand why he had always felt like an outsider in human society. His obsession with the ocean, his ability to see patterns in sonar readings that others missed, his instinctive understanding of marine life, it all made sense now. I need to ask you something, James said when he returned to Oceana and Narita. If I am half mermaid, are there others like me? Many others, Oceana confirmed. Throughout history, there have been mermaids who fell in love with humans, humans who fell in love with mermaids. Some of their children live among humans, never knowing their true heritage. Others have found their way to us. And my mother? What happened to her? Narita's expression grew sad. Her name was Marina. She was young, curious about the surface world. She fell in love with a human sailor and chose to take human form to be with him. But when she became pregnant, she knew the child would be in danger if certain factions of our people discovered its existence. What kind of danger? There are those among us who believe that contact with humans is too dangerous, that hybrid children represent a threat to our secrecy. Marina brought you to the surface to protect you. Is she still alive? She died giving birth to you, Oceana said gently. But she made us promise to watch over you, to guide you to us when the time was right. James felt tears streaming down his face. So my entire life, my career, my obsession with finding you, it was all orchestrated? No, Narita said firmly. Your choices were your own. We merely provided opportunities. The decision to become a marine biologist, the decision to search for us despite ridicule, the decision to take risks that others wouldn't take, those were all you. And now you have to decide who you want to be. Human, mermaid, or something in between. James looked around at the incredible city, at the civilization that offered harmony with nature, advanced knowledge, and a chance to be part of something larger than himself. Then he thought about the surface world, with all its problems and challenges, but also with its potential for growth and change. If I undergo the transformation, could I ever return to the surface? Not in your current form. The change is permanent. And if I remain human, could I still be part of this? Could I help build bridges between our worlds? Oceana smiled. That, James, is exactly what we were hoping you would ask. I want to do both, James said suddenly. I want to help our species work together. But I also want to remain who I am. I think being caught between two worlds might be exactly what's needed. You would become our first official ambassador to the surface world, Narita said. It would be dangerous. There would be humans who would try to exploit what you know, and mermaids who would see you as a traitor to our secrecy. But it might be the only way to save both our civilizations, James replied. The ocean is dying. Climate change threatens everyone. Maybe it's time for the truth. 6 months later, Dr. James Hartwell stood before the United Nations General Assembly, flanked by Nerita and 2 other mermaid representatives who had taken temporary human form for the occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, James said, looking out at an audience that would have called him insane just a year earlier, I am here today to introduce you to our planet's other intelligent species. A people who have lived in our oceans for thousands of years, who have watched over marine ecosystems, and who are now willing to work with us to heal the damage we have done to our shared world. The revelation of mermaid civilization sent shockwaves around the globe. There were those who reacted with fear, others with wonder, and still others who immediately began planning how to exploit this new discovery. But there were also those who understood that this was humanity's chance to learn from a species that had achieved what humans had always struggled with: true harmony with their environment. The question now, James continued in his address, is not whether mermaids exist. We have proven that beyond doubt. The question is whether our 2 species can work together to create a future where both the land and the sea can thrive. 5 years later, the Terran Aquatic Alliance had established joint research stations, shared technology programs, and cooperative efforts to reverse climate change and ocean pollution. James split his time between the surface world and Aquatilia, serving as humanity's primary liaison with mermaid civilization. Do you ever regret not choosing transformation? Nerita asked him during one of his visits to the underwater city. No, James replied, watching human and mermaid scientists work together on a project to restore coral reefs. I think I'm exactly where I need to be, caught between 2 worlds, helping them understand each other. Your mother would be proud, Oceana said, joining their conversation. Marina always believed that our species were meant to work together. James smiled, looking up through the water toward the surface where sunlight filtered down from the world above. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was meant to be a bridge between worlds. And in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, in a city that had remained hidden for millennia, the future of 2 species continued to unfold through the vision of one man who had spent his life searching for truth and found something greater than he had ever imagined: a chance to heal the world.